You never helped family. Not once. Not when Dad was sick, not when the twins were born, not ever. My sister Renee said that in front of 11 people at our mother's 72nd birthday dinner, and for a second I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. Then I saw her face. She wasn't joking. She meant it, and she meant for everyone at that table. My mother, my Aunt Carol, Renee's own husband Mark, my daughter Ivy, to hear it and believe it.
I'm Denise Ashford.
I'm 49 years old. I live in Dayton, Ohio, in the same split-level house I bought in 2003, 3 miles from the house Renee and I grew up in on Force Road. And for 6 years, I had been quietly wiring money into an account to keep my sister's family from losing everything. The mortgage, the medical bills, a car repo that almost happened twice. 6 years. Nobody knew. That was the deal Renee and I made, back when she begged me to keep it quiet so Mark wouldn't feel like less of a man. So when she said, "You never helped family," something in me went very still and very quiet, the way water gets right before it starts to boil. If you've ever done something good for someone and watched them rewrite the story so you're the villain in it, you already know exactly what that stillness feels like. Stay with me on this one, not because I need the numbers, but because I think a lot of you have a Renee in your life, and I want you to see what I did next and whether you'd have done the same thing. Because what happened over the next 10 minutes at that dinner table changed my family for good. And it didn't end the way anyone expected, including me. To understand why that sentence cuts so deep, you have to understand who Renee and I used to be to each other. I'm the older one by 4 years. Our father, Walt Ashworth, ran a small appliance repair shop off Wayne Avenue for 31 years, and our mother, Joan, kept the books. We didn't have much growing up, but we had each other. And Renee used to say I was the only person who never made her feel stupid for asking questions. I believed for most of my life that we'd always have that. Renee married Mark Delfino in 2011. He was charming and restless, the kind of man who always had a plan that was 6 months from paying off. By 2017, that plan had become a used car dealership that never quite got off the ground, and the debt behind it was ugly. Almost $40,000 between the business loan, credit cards, and a second mortgage they'd taken on their house in Kettering. That's when Renee called me, crying, at 11 at night. She didn't ask me to fix it. She asked me to help her hide it from Mark's parents, who'd loaned him startup money and thought it was thriving, and eventually, without ever quite saying it out loud, from our own mother, who Renee said, "Worried enough already." I said yes because I loved her and because I had the means. I'd done well in medical billing management, no husband or kids of my own until later, no big overhead. I started small. Then it wasn't small anymore. The warning sign I ignored looking back was this. The more I gave, the less Renee looked at me like a sister, and the more she looked at me like a resource. I told myself that was just stress. I was wrong. If you've ever loved someone enough to become invisible to them, you already understand what came next. The debt didn't disappear overnight. It took years, and it took discipline neither of us talked about out loud. Every month, on the 3rd, I wired $600 to an account Renee had opened under her maiden name, Renee Ashworth, specifically so Mark wouldn't see Delfino on the statement and ask questions. Some months it was more. The year the twins, Cody and Marissa, were born, I covered a $4,200 hospital bill in full after their insurance dragged its feet. I never told Ivy, my own daughter, why some Christmases were leaner than others. Renee thanked me constantly at first. "I don't know what we'd do without you. You're the only one who gets it. This stays between us. Denny, promise me." I promised. I kept it. But somewhere around year 4, the thank yous stopped and the requests didn't. She started saying "we need" instead of "could you." When I gently asked in 2021 if Mark's dealership was ever going to turn a corner, Renee snapped at me. "Not everyone gets to have it as easy as you did, Denise," as if I'd inherited my stability instead of building it while working 60-hour weeks and raising Ivy alone after my divorce. Then, this spring, Mark's parents found out, not from me, from a bank error, that the second mortgage had been paid down faster than they'd been told. They assumed Renee and Mark had finally gotten ahead on their own. Renee let them believe it. That's the moment I should have said something. Instead, I stayed quiet the way I always had. I told myself I didn't need credit for love. I was about to learn how expensive that silence could get. The birthday dinner was at Marchetti's, the Italian place on Wilmington Pike Moms loved since it opened. 14 of us, long table, the kind of noise that means a family is actually a family. Ivy sat next to me. Mark sat across from Renee, half watching a Bengals highlight on his phone. It started innocently. My Aunt Carol raised her glass and said something about how the Ashworth girls always take care of each other, and smiled at me the way she'd done my whole life. Renee's jaw tightened. I didn't understand why until she set her wine glass down harder than she needed to. "Can we stop pretending," she said, loud enough that the table went quiet, "that Denise has ever actually taken care of anyone but herself?" My mother blinked. "Renee." "No, really." Renee looked straight at me. "You never helped family. Not once. Not when Dad was sick, not when the twins were born, not ever. You've spent 30 years acting like you're better than us because you don't have Mark's problems, and you know what? Maybe if you'd ever actually helped, we wouldn't have had them." Ivy's hand found my knee under the table. My mother's face had gone pale. 6 years. 6 years of $600 checks and hospital bills, and a secret I'd kept to protect Renee's marriage, her pride, her standing with people who genuinely thought she and Mark had built themselves back up on their own. "Renee," I said, very quietly, "do you actually want me to answer that? If you've ever had someone rewrite history right in front of the people who love you both, you know how loud silence can get in a crowded room." She didn't back down.
"Go ahead," she said.
"Tell everyone how much you've done." Here's the twist nobody at that table saw coming, including, in a way, me. I hadn't planned to say anything that night or ever, honestly. But my mother, who I thought had no idea about any of it, reached over and put her hand flat on the table between us. "Denise has been sending Renee money since 2018, my mother said. I've known for 2 years. The table went dead silent. Renee's face drained of color. It turned out my mother had found a bank statement by accident in 2023, doing Renee's taxes for her the year Renee's accountant quit last minute. She'd seen the recurring transfers from my account. She never said a word to either of us. She told me later she was waiting to see if Renee would ever tell the truth on her own, because she wanted to believe her daughter would. I kept hoping, my mother said, her voice shaking, that you'd tell me yourself, Renee. That you'd give Denise the credit. Instead, I've had to sit at Thanksgiving and listen to you tell people Mark turned it around himself. Mark, to his credit, looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Turned what around, he said slowly. Renee, what is she talking about? That's when I understood the real reason Renee had lied for years. Not cruelty, not simple ingratitude.
Shame.
She couldn't stand for Mark to know she'd needed rescuing, because Mark's own father had once called him the son who never quite gets it right, and Renee had spent her marriage trying to prove him wrong. It didn't excuse what she said, but it explained it. And for the first time in 6 years, I saw my sister as scared instead of cruel. Comment below, would you have stayed quiet as long as I did, or said something sooner? Mark stood up from the table. Not angrily, stunned. 6 years, he said, looking at Renee. Denise has been covering us for 6 years, and you told your own mother I fixed it myself? Renee started crying, the kind of crying that comes from being caught rather than being sorry, at least at first. I didn't want you to feel like a failure, she said to him. Your dad already thinks. So, you let my sister-in-law carry us instead of just telling me the truth? Mark's voice cracked. Renee, I'd rather feel like a failure than find out my wife's been lying to me at Christmas. Ivy squeezed my hand under the table. My daughter is 22, and she looked at me with an expression I'll never forget, somewhere between pride and heartbreak, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time.
I didn't yell.
I didn't need to. I just said calmly, Renee, I never once asked you to thank me publicly. I asked you to stop pretending I don't exist in this family story. There's a difference. She didn't answer right away. Aunt Carol quietly excused the younger cousins from the table. My mother sat with her hand over her mouth. Later that night, Renee called me at almost midnight. Not to apologize yet, to ask in a small voice I hadn't heard since we were kids, are you going to stop helping us now? I didn't have an answer for her that night. For the first time in 6 years, I let the silence sit between us instead of rushing to fill it with reassurance. If you've ever had to decide whether love means giving in or giving space, you know that silence isn't the same as walking away. It took 3 weeks for Renee to actually apologize, really apologize, not the kind wrapped in an excuse. She showed up at my house on a Sunday in April, without calling first, and stood on my porch on Force Ridge Court looking like she hadn't slept. "I've been ashamed my whole marriage," she said. "Not of you.
Of me."
And it was easier to make you small than to admit how small I felt. I let her in. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where she used to do her homework in 1994 while I quizzed her on spelling words. "I should have told Mark the truth in 2018, she said. "I should have told Mom. I should have told everyone what you did instead of pretending it was mine to be proud of." I told her the truth, too, that I hadn't kept the secret purely out of generosity. Part of me liked being the one who was needed, the one who was quietly indispensable, because it meant I never had to ask for anything back. We'd both been hiding, just in different directions. Mark, for his part, had a harder conversation with his own father, the man whose disappointment Renee had spent a decade trying to outrun on Mark's behalf. His father cried, apparently, and admitted he'd never once said he was proud of his son, not since the dealership opened. That conversation had nothing to do with me, but it changed something in that house. Renee didn't become a different person overnight, but she stopped performing for the family and started actually talking to us instead. That's usually how real change looks, quieter than people expect, and a lot less dramatic than the moment that forced it. By June, something had genuinely shifted. Renee told Mark's parents the truth herself, at their own kitchen table, without me there and without me knowing she planned to. She called me right after. "I told them everything," she said. "About the loans, the mortgage, what Denise did. I couldn't keep building a life on top of a lie." Mark's father, apparently, just nodded for a long time and then said, "I always liked Denise better anyway," which made both of us laugh for the first time in months. We had a family dinner at my house in July, not a birthday, not an obligation, just a Tuesday, because Renee asked if she could bring the twins over to see my garden. Cody, who's 7, asked me why I had so many tomato plants, and Renee, unprompted, told him, "Aunt Denise grows things other people give up on." I don't think she meant just tomatoes. My mother started sleeping better. She told me she'd been carrying that bank statement secret for 2 years, and it had weighed on her more than either of us realized. Watching her exhale, watching Renee and Mark actually talk to each other instead of around each other, watching Ivy warm back up to her aunt, that was worth more to me than any thank you I never got. I never asked Renee to pay me back. I told her the money was never the point.
"I know," she said.
"The point was that I let people believe I didn't need anyone. And I made you disappear to protect that lie. Small dinners. Small tomatoes. That's how you rebuild something, not all at once, but Tuesday by Tuesday." It's been 4 months since that birthday dinner at Marchetti's, and I think about it differently now than I did that night. At the time, I thought Renee's words were about cruelty. Now I understand they were about fear. The fear of being seen as someone who needed rescuing, in a family and a marriage where needing help had always looked like failure. That doesn't erase what she said, but it helps me understand why she said it and why forgiving her didn't feel like losing. My mother apologized to me too, for staying quiet for 2 years instead of pushing Renee to tell the truth sooner. I told her I understood. She was hoping her daughter would choose honesty on her own, the same way I'd hoped Renee would choose gratitude on her own. We'd both been waiting for the same impossible thing. If you've ever quietly carried someone for years and wondered if they even noticed, I want you to hear this. Someone probably did notice. It might take longer than you want, but the truth has a way of finding the table eventually, even when you didn't put it there yourself. Ivy told me last week that watching that dinner unfold changed how she thinks about generosity. She said she used to think helping people meant staying invisible about it. Now she thinks the people who love you the most deserve to know what you've carried for them, not so they'll thank you, but so they actually know you. I think that's the real lesson here. Not that Renee was wrong to need help. Not even that she was wrong to be scared. Just that love kept in the dark curdles into something neither person recognizes, and love spoken out loud, even messily, even years too late, still has a chance to heal. Renee and I talk almost every day now. Not about money. We haven't discussed a single dollar since that night at Marchetti's. We talk about Cody's soccer games, about my tomatoes, about our mother, about nothing important at all, which is its own kind of miracle after 6 years of only talking about what needed fixing. Last weekend, she showed up with a card, handwritten, that just said, "Thank you for 30 years of being my sister, even the 6 I made hardest for you." I keep it in my kitchen drawer, next to the spare keys. I still think about that moment at dinner sometimes. Renee's voice saying I'd never helped family, my mother's hand flat on the table, Mark's face when he realized what had really happened. I don't feel angry when I think about it anymore. I feel grateful it finally came out, even that way, even in front of everyone, because some truths only move when they're forced to. If you've ever loved someone quietly and wondered if it counted because no one saw it, it counted. It always counted. I've told this story because I've heard from so many of you now who've carried something similar, and honestly, it's helped me more than you know to not feel alone in it. If you're the one who's always given without asking for the credit, stay with me. I'd love for you to be here for the next one too. And if you know someone who's spent years being the family member nobody thanks at the table, send them this. They might need to hear that it counted. Tell me in the comments, has anyone in your family ever tried to rewrite your story? I read every single one.